Dak Prescott, I think actually we're recording this at 3:50 p.m. This franchise tag deadline is at 4 p.m. I believe that Dak Prescott will actually be franchise tagged as a procedural measure. So when that happens, people don't freak out about it happening. He is getting a long-term deal though. And that leads me to the question, when you look at the list of people who've been tagged, and here they are: Chris Godwin, Allen Robinson, Justin Simmons, Taylor Moton, Leonard Williams, Brandon Scherff, Marcus Maye, Marcus Williams, and Cam Robinson. You know what? I should probably point out who those people play for. Crap. Chris Godwin, Buccaneers wide receiver; Allen Robinson, Bears wide receiver; Justin Simmons, Broncos safety; Taylor Moton, Panthers offensive lineman, right tackle; Leonard Williams, defensive lineman for the Giants; Brandon Scherff, or Scherff, however you pronounce it, for offensive guard for the Washington football team; Marcus Maye, Jet safety; Marcus Williams, Saints safety; and Cam Robinson, Jaguars tackle, are all getting franchised. We'll dive into them a little bit more. Is there anybody on that list that you see that you think is a really good candidate for a long-term extension?
There's not a ton of them. I mean, when I look at the list, I think that Taylor Moton with the Panthers is maybe one of the more obvious candidates, just because that's a young tackle. You're going to be, whoever's going to be playing quarterback in Carolina, I don't think it's Teddy Bridgewater for the long term, but presumably, let's say they draft a guy, they trade for Deshaun Watson or something. That's a guy you want to lock up. I mean, I don't think that's a one-year play for them, as opposed to, Marcus Maye with the Jets. I don't envision that being, the Jets did that with a long-term deal in mind. So I look at that. And then Leonard Williams, only because I think if Dave Gettleman is doing this, paying almost $20 million to kind of justify the Leonard Williams acquisition. And to be fair, I mean, Leonard Williams played a lot better this past year.
He's awesome.
Yeah, but I think that he could further justify that move by, locking him up, especially with Dalvin Tomlinson looking like he's headed to the market.
I think those are good calls. So when you look at the Giants, Dave, I've said this repeatedly. Now, with adding Leonard Williams with a $19.35 million cap hit, they're now $5 million over the cap, based on a $188 million projected cap. They really have to sign him. They have to figure out a way to sign him at this point. If you are franchise tagging somebody twice, you better be planning to sign them long-term. Now, there's nothing wrong with, I don't want to hate the word, using them on a year-to-year deal. But if you're going to trade a second-round pick for Leonard Williams, Dave Gettleman is just so stubborn. I think he's going to keep shoving all in on himself.
Yeah.
It's Daniel Jones or Saquon Barkley with a contract, or Leonard Williams, trade a second-round pick for him, franchise tagged him twice. At this point, just give him a deal,
Yeah. And at this point, he may, it may work in his favor, because if Leonard Williams plays, even 70% of what he did in 2020 for the Giants, I mean, I think that, if he was a guy on the open market, like you said, they're going to save money immediately with an extension. That frees up money where you can go and maybe get Daniel Jones, a wide receiver. But yeah, I think that he's the kind of guy that on the open market was going to make, close to $20 million a year on a huge deal. And so with Dalvin Tomlinson walking, I don't think it's the worst investment in the world, even if the process to get him was, a little bit flawed.
Yeah. And they're likely going to cut Nate Solder, I think, which, it is what it is. That'll save him $6 million and get him under the cap right there, with probably more moves to come. I think Brandon Scherff is a decent candidate in Washington. They've now tagged him twice. And again, if you're watching, Washington has $41 million in cap space, I think, even with the Scherff tag, maybe $35 million after. I'll look it up. But they're a team that is not in the same position as the Giants. But I think you still want to, if you're tagging the guy twice, surely you like him enough that you want to keep him around. Yeah, $41 million, even with the Scherff tag. That's in large part thanks to getting rid of Alex Smith. And again, they could still have some cuts to come as well. But Scherff, to me, makes sense as a guy with that. He's eating up 9% of your cap, and you need to figure out a way to get a quarterback. So I wouldn't be surprised if they did something there. Marcus Maye wouldn't be shocking if he's willing to take an under market deal, if only because the Jets have tons of money and no good players. So why not? If you're willing to franchise tag a guy like Maye, go ahead and do it. And then I think somebody else that I was looking at. Justin Simmons feels like a guy they're going year to year with, even though they've tagged him twice. That's just how the Broncos are rolling there. I agree with you. Taylor Moton makes sense as a good candidate. And then I think Chris Godwin makes sense too. The Bucs have a ton of money. They're working on an extension for Tom Brady. Jason Lockenford has reported. So we're talking about 3 years, adding on to Tom Brady's stretch run here where they want him to play 2 or 3 more years. And if you're doing that, why not keep Chris Godwin in the fold? I don't know that, you can, I don't know. He's not going to take like 15 million a year, maybe 17 million a year will get it done, or 16 million a year. But, he's young. You sign him to a 3-year deal. You say, listen, you're going to play with Tom Brady for the next 3 years. It's going to be awesome. You're going to chase titles. You're going to be in Tampa. No state income tax. Team that drafted you. We love you. You love us. And then he's, can hit the open market at 27 when the Bucs maybe are thinking about resetting things.
Yeah. I don't want to overestimate, I guess, Tampa Bay's ability to negotiate with him, but that one almost does feel like a given. I mean, it feels like Chris Godwin is a Buccaneer. I mean, just because of these circumstances right now.
Well, and let's not forget that, they had Levante David and Shaq Barrett, 2 critical figures in the Super Bowl run, who are free agents as well. And they chose Godwin as the tag. Now, I was arguing all along. I thought Godwin would be the guy. So I'm not surprised that he was the guy. His age, the position, and the fact that, he would command a lot more, I think, on the open market than Barrett and David. So in that sense, I'm not surprised. But, if you tag this kid, he's 24, tag him, sign him to a deal, even if it's a shorter bridge deal, and just keep him around for Tom Brady. That's what you want to do for Brady. Allen Robinson is a non-starter on a contract. That situation to me feels like it could get ugly, Cody.
Yeah, that's the one I think to watch, really, because he hasn't been like Yannick Ngakoue did, when he was with Jacksonville and basically declared publicly that he wasn't going to play under the tag. I mean, I don't know that Allen Robinson is at that stage yet, but it's been, they've had months to get a long-term deal done. Allen Robinson has expressed the desire to get a deal done. It hasn't. And he's a guy that, much like Chris Godwin, I mean, if he actually hit free agency, I mean, you're talking about a dozen teams, if not more, that are probably serious about big money for him. Because you look at a team like we talked about the Giants. I mean, teams with money to spend that need a number 1 wide receiver. He would have had plenty of offers. I mean, I think in his mind, I mean, imagine dreaming up the scenario of going to play, go back to Florida, play in Miami for the Dolphins with a big new contract, or go to a team that's contending for playoffs and has a quarterback situation like he's never had before. I mean, we've joked all season about Allen Robinson playing with poor quarterbacks. He's still stuck in Chicago where they're trying to figure that out. So yeah, it could get contentious.
They're now $20 million under or over the cap, negative $20 million in terms of cap space. That is a problem. They have guys they can cut. Jimmy Graham feels like an obvious cut at, save $7 million there. They got some other guys that could certainly be cut candidates. But the big thing for me is, you've got Robinson in there, right? And I understand the GM and the coach are desperate. They're on the hot seat. So just, they made the playoffs, but they still have to win this year, a really bad season. Then maybe they get fired. So you don't want to let your top offensive player go. You don't have a quarterback though. I mean, no offense. I know you're a Nick Foles guy and Devo's on here too. So I don't want to drag Nick Foles, but I mean, you're just not set up to make Allen Robinson happy. And so now you're in a position where I think 1 or 2 things has to happen if you're the Bears. One, you trade Allen Robinson and get a pick back and let somebody else, tag and trade. We've seen tons of those, and that wouldn't be shocking. Washington, again, has tons of cap space. They need somebody alongside Terry McLaurin. That could be a possible fit. The Giants, we said don't exactly aren't flush with cap space, but they're apparently looking at Kenny Golladay. The Dolphins are looking at possible wide receivers. So there'd be plenty of people who'd be interested in Allen Robinson. Maybe you get a late second, maybe you get a third, or 2, you trade for Russell Wilson, which is impossibly hard with negative $20 million in cap space.
Yeah, the first one seems a lot more likely, doesn't it? I mean, I think that, and maybe you, again, like you said, the return for Allen Robinson, especially on the franchise tag, no long-term deal in place, the return for him isn't necessarily going to be, a couple of premium picks, but maybe you take that pick, whether it's a second round pick, and you flip it right into a deal to go get your quarterback. because I think that, Allen Robinson, even on the
Maybe
tag,
trade
is
Allen
probably
Robinson to the Seahawks.
well. There you go. I
don't know they want to, but right.
They'll turn him into a tight end. He can block for the run game. But Allen Robinson, right, even on the tag, is probably one of the Bears' best assets. Best trade chips. And so, ideally, Ryan Pace, Matt Nagy, they want Allen Robinson there so that the quarterback that they get can, throw him the ball. But I think if you're looking at their roster, you mentioned people that could be cut or they need to cut people. Kyle Fuller, Akeem Hicks. I mean, these are big names that might have to be cut to keep Allen Robinson. So the alternative might be you take him and you try and use him as part of your package to get the quarterback.
And you know what? The Bears can do something stupid like play chicken until the start of the league year and rescind the franchise tag. Because Robinson's probably not signing the franchise tag. You know what I mean? So you could see how things progress over the next week in possible quarterback maneuvers. And you have until Wednesday at 4 p.m. to get under the salary cap. So that would be a shoddy move because it would leave Allen Robinson hanging out to dry. But, if you're desperate, you got to do what you got to do. The one really interesting one here, actually, before we get to that, are you surprised by, actually, no, think about it. Sorry. Marcus Williams tagged by the Saints. I mean, he's a good player, unfortunately had the Minneapolis Miracle on his face, but by and large has been a very good player for the Saints. Part of their 2017 draft class, because he wasn't a first-round pick, he didn't have the fifth-year option. Ryan Ramczyk and Marshawn Lattimore were both on the fifth-year options. But now the Saints they're in cap hell, Cody. How were you surprised to see them tag Marcus Williams?
Yeah, and I know that now people are kind of pointing out how the Saints seem to do this every year. We see examples of this, where it just looks like they are completely unable to go out and spend it. Yeah, frankly, I'm surprised that they did it because that's a big investment at the safety position where you've already got Malcolm Jenkins earning over $8 million a year. The likely path forward though with him is an extension, kind of in that Leonard Williams mold of we're saving cap space up front by actually locking this guy up long term. Because on the open market, I mean, Marcus Williams probably would have been, outside of Marcus Maye, he's going to get one of the top deals that, he's a young up and coming safety. Yeah. So yeah, a little bit surprised, but are there probably a flurry of other moves coming with the Saints? I mean, we're still waiting on the quarterback position, but guys are going to be axed left and right. We saw, some of those are gone already.
I don't think we're going to see Drew Brees. So I was looking at this the other day. So if Drew Brees retires this week, and look, for all we know, Drew Brees is trying to decide what to do, because that would be a very Drew Brees thing. Like, I want to run it back one more year with the Saints team, and the Saints, the way the Saints are moving pieces around on the board in terms of the roster, it does look like they're not, this is not a rebuild. They're not tearing the pieces down and shipping them out. Brees, though, if he were to file retirement paperwork with the league in like this week, he would go from being a 12.225 cap hit for the Saints to a 22.65 dead cap hit for the Saints. So it would actually cost him $10 million. If he waits to retire until after June 1st, the dead cap would actually be 11. It would be half of that, I believe, and split over 2 years. So it's totally possible that Drew Brees is doing them a solid and is just going to be quiet about this and not mention it until.
Is it possible to designate, like, how some teams can designate a post June 1st cut? But can you do that now?
No, he would just wait until, and I don't know the full. So he would wait until June 1st to file the official paperwork. Right. But if he's processed on the transaction wire, that's what I don't know. I don't know if he can delay I don't think he can say like, hey, I'm done, but we're going to wait. So that, because even the designation in the June 1st doesn't actually, you don't get the relief until June 1st. You know what I mean? So it doesn't help you at the beginning of the league year. I think, but you're right. We're getting a flurry of moves for these guys. I would expect a release of Quan Alexander. I think you could see a release of Janoris Jenkins. They don't want to do that if possible, but they certainly can. And then I think you're going to see Ryan Ramczyk, Marcus Williams, and Emmanuel Sanders probably gets released, but Ryan Ramczyk, Marcus Williams, and Marshawn Lattimore all do extensions that are sort of like the Breeze extension last year or the Dak extension this year. Dummy years on the back end, designed to spread out a signing bonus, designed to minimize their cap hit, and then you keep the team together and you push forward. And that seems like where they are. Malcolm Brown, a possible cap casualty as well. I mean, they can get down. I mean, they're at 55 million over the cap. By the way, the Larry Holder, a friend of the podcast, great dude who covers the Saints for The Athletic, has an article that came out, I believe today, and it's titled Saints 53-man roster projection, grab an IPA and brace yourself. It's great, Larry. Unbelievable. So yeah, I think the Marcus Williams thing we didn't really touch on it, but it does seem like that needs to lead to an extension. I know Pete Prisco was surprised by Cam Robinson being tagged by the Jaguars. Their left tackle, Pete. I don't want to speak for Pete in terms of I don't want to put Pete on the record here without him being present, but I just think his belief was that the Jaguars were ready to go in a different direction. But if you're drafting a Trevor Lawrence first overall, it does make some sense to keep the incumbent left tackle around.
I suppose. I mean, I guess I would side with Pete. I mean, Pete's the assumption that we have that Pete's making.
I know that Pete was surprised and didn't think they were doing it. I don't want to. I don't want to I don't know what Pete's put out there on Cam Robinson. I'll find it.
I do think though that, and I don't want to speak for Jacksonville, but I think that the Jaguars fan base, I mean, that contingent of the NFL fan base, I think that they were anticipating something similar. I don't know that Cam Robinson, like you said, I mean, I guess logically being able to say, hey, we're not going to be completely blank slate at left tackle, which is pretty important for Trevor Lawrence. But Cam Robinson, I mean, depending on who you ask, was one of the worst, graded pass protectors in 2020. And you're not just bringing back a guy to maybe compete in camp. I mean, if you're going to pay him $14.5 million, that's Pro Bowl starter money there. And so I don't know, that one a little bit surprised me too. I think that, there's not a ton of options in free agency. I don't know that they were going to go out and pay huge money to a guy like Trent Williams, but they have money to spend and they've got draft picks too, where I wouldn't be surprised if they try and plug it there.
I searched for Prisco's tweets on Cam Robinson, and it all showed up as 2017 tweets. He's like, Cam Robinson's going to be a damn good player. And Cam Robinson absolutely abused Jadeveon Clowney. He replied to Field Yates. He's like, Yates is like, Myles Garrett's incredible. And Pete's like, yet he had no sacks against Cam Robinson. So I don't know where Pete stands on this exactly. I have texted him that screenshot. And I'll wait to see his reply. But Pete was surprised that they signed Cam Robinson. Didn't think he was very good. I don't think necessarily thought he might be a fit in the new regime. But here we are, and Cam Robinson is back. As we mentioned, Taylor Moton makes a lot of sense for the Panthers to re-sign. Don't think Justin Simmons will, but in Denver, but could. Do think Brandon Scherff will, and that covers. As we were recording, the 4:00 hour passed, the deadline passed. Aaron Jones, not franchise tagged, and Karl Lawson and William Jackson, not franchise tagged by the Bengals. Aaron Jones by the Packers. If you had to pick, what was your biggest surprise for player not tagged leading up to?
I think that one was pretty easy, and that was Kenny Golladay. I think that, we talk about Allen Robinson. I think Kenny Golladay was right up there in terms of, I think a lot of people expected him to get the tag, not because he was necessarily going to stay with the Lions, but because Detroit seemed like a logical move would be to tag him and then trade him, try and get something for him. Instead, it looks like he's just going to walk right into the open market and probably happily sign elsewhere. So again, they'll get a decent pick next year if he gets a big deal, but that's not.
He should net them a third round compensatory pick, I would think.
But if they tagged him and trade in this offseason, what do you think they're getting?
I think they get probably a better pick for him.
Yeah.
Like a middle, because compensatory pick is obviously, as people know, at the end of the third round. I think they get at least a third round pick for him this year, which you'd rather have that in hand than the future. But look, he wasn't staying there.
Yeah. I think that's maybe the crux of the, maybe in the conversations they had, there was hey, if we get tagged, we're not signing it, or, it was contingent on you're going to trade us here or here. Because he is, he is a top 3 wide receiver on this free agent market. So yeah,
For sure. If not
now he's number 1, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. With Godwin and with Godwin and Robinson get tagged, I think he's definitely number 1. It leaves the Lions extremely thin at wide receiver. I'm looking at the depth chart. I see Quintus Cephas, Victor Bolden, and Tom Kennedy. Am I missing somebody?
Tyrell Williams.
They signed Tyrell Williams. Well.
But that's a gamble.
Yeah, exactly. That's a hot mess. Jared Goff not exactly loving life in his first year in Detroit. And by the way, the GM went on the Hustle and Flow podcast with for NFL.com and with Jim Trotter and Steve Weiss, the venerable Jim Trotter and Steve Weiss. And they're asked, like, are you still done looking for quarterbacks? He's like, no, Lord, oh no, God, we are still looking. It was bad, man.
Poor Jared Goff, huh?
I know, right? I would agree with you that Galladay's the biggest surprise, although it seemed like things were kind of heading there as we got closer to the deadline. I'll throw out that Hunter Henry not getting tagged by the Chargers was a bit of a shocker for me. That's a team I think is trying to win now. They have cap space. I think Henry's a great player. He hadn't lived up to expectations because he's been injured a bunch. But I mean, man, if I got a developing young quarterback, I want to keep one of his top weapons around. And he had a really good rapport with Justin Herbert last year, caught a bunch of touchdowns. Herbert's losing his offensive line. Henry's a great run blocker and a great inline blocker. So I'm a little surprised they let him walk. And let's just say, Cody, I got my antenna up on what the Chargers are doing this offseason as it relates to Justin Herbert's performance in 2021.
I would look out for Zach Ertz in this spot. I know there was some whispers about the Chargers maybe being interested there. I mean, Zach Ertz, I think he would welcome that change of scenery to California. I know the Eagles are shopping him, and so he might come a little cheaper than Hunter Henry because, you're talking about a younger, maybe more upside profile there. So Bud Dupree, another guy that didn't get tagged, I don't think, not too much of a surprise because the Steelers are pressed up against the cap. But yeah, I think Hunter Henry. Yeah. JuJu as well.
Henry, there's a meme out there of, well, I guess it's not a meme, but there's a photo of after the Chargers played the Patriots, Bill Belichick and Hunter Henry had this big embrace. I think somebody had tweeted, see you in free agency, pal. And man, it makes a lot of sense. Like if you go get Hunter Henry, I don't know if you get Kenny Golladay, but you go get Hunter Henry and you add some speed at receiver in the draft and you get Jimmy Garoppolo and those opt-out guys come back, you can talk me into the Patriots being a much better team.
Speaking of Hunter Henry to the Patriots, stay tuned for the free agency mock. Might have something for you with that one.
Well, let's coming up after the break, Cody's free agency mock. Will Hunter Henry go to the Patriots? Find out next. The other guy that I forgot to mention who didn't get tagged, Jonnu Smith, but I don't think anybody thought that. Man, I want the Patriots to go sign Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, but let's dive into the free agency draft. So you did this as a fun exercise last week before tags have been handed out. So that has to be very clear, but it's basically like you take all the free agents and you don't give them the ability to sign anywhere. The teams in the draft order get to draft them. That actually, I mean, obviously this would be from a labor standpoint, not ideal, but would be kind of interesting. Or like what, you do it. So like, let's say the Jaguars are the first pick. They can draft any free agent they want and then have the opportunity to sign him. And if that free agent declines, maybe that wouldn't work. Anyway,
it's a fun exercise, but yeah,
you're have to emphasize trying to rank out. You're trying to rank out the free agents in a way that and how they would fit with these various teams.
Yeah, I mean, you find yourself when you're going through like any mock draft, you're weighing talent versus need because a guy might be the best free agent on the market, but if you've already got that position filled, you're up against it. But yeah, you have to emphasize fun exercise because I remember the first time I did this, probably, people get upset when you do some things like this sometimes because it's too nonsensical. They don't like that. So we're just having fun with it.
Okay. With the first overall selection in Cody Benjamin's 2021 NFL free agency mock draft. The Jaguars select Chris Godwin. Now, of course, this no longer any good because Godwin's not leaving.
Took all the thunder out of it.
Right. But I mean, that's the point being is that I don't disagree with you. I think Godwin, you got getting Trevor Lawrence in makes a lot of sense to get Godwin. Maybe more notable would be that the Jets at number 2 select another Tampa Bay Buccaneer, Shaquil Barrett.
Yeah. And that one was more, again, it's still the thunder because of the, it looks like he's going to get a long-term deal with Tampa, or at least they're trying, but he is, as of now, he could still hit free agency. So that's, again, these aren't necessarily where I see the money lining up. This is, if this were a draft and free agents were all in a pool, you could take anyone. I mean, I see New York as a team. They know they have a quarterback they can draft at number 2 in the real draft. They can flip Sam Darnold for something. Shaquil Barrett, to me, is just, that's an obvious value at a premium position. I mean, the Jets have been trying to get a really good pass rusher for a while. Joe Douglas likes to build in the trenches. He's a young guy. I think it fits, pretty seamlessly.
I'm going to counter your draft, and ironically counter your draft, because I think you thought Kenny Golladay was going to get tagged.
I did. And so actually,
there's no Allen Robinson or Kenny Golladay.
Yeah,
I think the Jets take Kenny Golladay to give Zach Wilson, or that's the danger of the draft, or any free agent, top 100 free agent list. Like, you're at the mercy of franchise tags, Yeah.
I went off our colleague Jason Lockenfor's list of guys that were most likely to get tagged. And to be fair, everyone mostly expected Kenny Golladay to get tagged. Karl Lawson not on this list. So we didn't include a few guys. But
you
yes,
the editors. You drag the editors through the mud for this. That's their fault. It's a lack of leadership at the top.
So yes, if Allen Robinson, if we're including everyone, including tagged people, this would look a little different. Allen Robinson is going before them. Kenny Golladay, I could argue the Shaquil Barrett one, but Golladay makes sense there.
I mean, pass rusher's huge. Yeah, I'm just saying they need help at wide receiver, and I don't think Denzel Mims is good. I like Denzel Mims, but he like Denzel Mims and Kenny Golladay. If they bring back Crowder, that's a nice little trio. You're developing some offensive linemen. Maybe even take Penei Sewell at number 2.
Maybe quarterback.
Yeah, probably quarterback.
Yeah.
Trade Sam Darnold to the 49ers for a late second round pick. And then you take Zach Wilson. You're cooking with gas. The Dolphins take Aaron Jones at number 3. That would be fun. I think that would help Tua a lot too.
Very high pick for a running back, but who cares? I mean, Aaron Jones is a guy that he's young enough. You can make him a focal point. He'll run the ball, catch the ball. Yeah, I think for a guy like Tua, I mean, he can dump it off there. I mean, it takes a lot of pressure off of Tua, especially if you can add a receiver in the real draft as well. Let's go get back to you.
No, I'm laughing at Vic Tafur tweeting about the trend. He said, if we came up with the money, John Gruden from 2019, if we came up with the money to make the Khalil Mack contract happen, we wouldn't have Trent Brown. We wouldn't have Antonio Brown, LaMarcus Jr. and Vontaze Burfict. We wouldn't have Tyrell Williams.
Yikes.
All those guys are gone. Hey, John Gruden. We like to drag the Raiders on this podcast. One thing, I think this is a perfect fit, and I really can't emphasize enough that the Bengals, you have them taking Trent Williams, number 5 overall, after the Falcons take Trey Hendrickson at 4. That's a great pick there too. But the Bengals have a chance with the way that this free agency is shaking out and I don't know that these guys are going to go play in Cincinnati, but you go make it rain on Trent Williams and on Joe Thuney. And you just solve the left side of your line. They have $46.5 million in cap space.
Yeah.
Quit being cheap. You got Joe Burrow. You have a duty to keep him healthy, to keep him upright, and to keep him from getting obliterated again. So go overpay out the wazoo for 2 blue chip offensive linemen that can develop with Joe Burrow. And again, I don't know that those guys will be like, oh, Cincinnati, how fantastic. I feel like Joe Thuney might be from, he went to NC State, obviously, but he's from Spring Valley, Ohio.
Perfect.
There we go.
I mean, I think that the idea of playing with Joe Burrow certainly brings a little more juice to the idea of playing for the Bengals, especially we see that in that division, it's possible to win the division and not be named the Steelers or go far in the playoffs. But yeah, I mean, for the Bengals, I've seen some people point out receiver. They've got some young receivers that are good. I think that the priority is protecting Joe Burrow. I mean, that should be very clear after last year. And so there are guys on the market that can help you do that.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Next up I love Trent Williams. He should have been comeback player of the year. Alex Smith to go and pull the I mean, obviously he wasn't going to win it. Yeah. The Eagles taking JuJu Smith-Schuster. You sure? I don't know. I feel like the Eagles are loaded with wide receivers.
Okay. I had to think.
Sorry, that's just me. That's only because Devo's here too. Only because you and Devo are here. The Eagles are not loaded. The Eagles have problems at wide receivers. That makes sense.
Yeah. I don't necessarily love JuJu as like a number one receiver, but I originally had Will Fuller there, and I don't know if the availability, the injury history is maybe a little too much to gamble with that high of a pick. I mean, JuJu feels like a safe kind of plug and play. You put him in the slot. If Jalen Hurts is there, that's a guy you can dump it off. I mean, in real life, this is not happening. The Eagles don't have the money,
right?
But
in the draft,
he's
young.
He's super young.
He would be a good fit in Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson's not there. What am I talking about? I forgot Doug Peterson went there.
I thought that was a joke.
No, I was trying to play it off as a joke, and then I realized that I just forgot Doug Peterson's not there. But Nick Sirianni's scheme, in theory, I mean, it's kind of so. I mean, there's some similarities. Like you need to get it up underneath, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, he can be a safety valve for whoever. It's going to be a young quarterback, most likely. Whether it's Jalen Hurts, a rookie, I think a guy like JuJu, he's big, he's tough. He'll go over the middle. I mean, you can essentially, play him like a tight end out wide. And so that was the logic behind that one.
Leonard Williams going to the Lions. He was obviously tagged. The Panthers taking Levante David. Broncos getting Bud Dupree. That's a really nice fit, especially if Von Miller ends up going elsewhere and Bud Dupree not tagged. Bud Dupree, you would think, is going to get a pretty nice payday, but it could end up being a shorter term deal for him just because his production is limited to contract years. And although he developed much better as a run defender than people thought he would. You had the Chargers and the Patriots doing what could have frankly been a swap last year. The Chargers taking Joe Thuney at number 13 and the Patriots, as we teased, taking Hunter Henry. I mean, I think it stinks for the Patriots to lose Joe Thuney, but I think that this would be a smart move for both teams because the Chargers are desperate for offensive line help, as we covered on yesterday's podcast. And you have the Patriots who really need pass catchers. And they drafted a couple young tight ends, but in Devin Asiasi and Dalton Keene. But I mean, really, they need a stud who can catch the ball. So in my opinion, I love the picks.
I think those are two that actually could work in real life. I mean, they fit. I think that the Patriots are prepared to lose Joe Thuney. I mean, by last year, the extension talks, they didn't go anywhere. He was a guy that was speculated as a trade possibility at the deadline. I mean, the writing has been on the wall. I think they're prepared to let him walk. And now, making that acquisition from the Raiders, I think they're set there. And Hunter Henry just feels like a Patriot. I mean, he feels like a guy that would go there. They're sniffing around Kyle Rudolph. They've sniffed around tight ends. They tried to draft a few. He just makes so much sense. A guy that's a bigger name, wouldn't necessarily be a reclamation project, but he's got enough left in the tank to be there for 5-10 years to do something.
I agree with that. By the way, before we talk about some quarterbacks who got drafted in this situation as well, we should point out that it is the month of madness, and the Eye on College Basketball podcast is here as your audio guide for the entire NCAA tournament, plus, of course, the conference tournaments. Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander will offer a complete breakdown as soon as the bracket is announced on Sunday, so you stand a chance in your pool this year. Both Matt and Gary, real life friends of mine, are fantastic at what they do. Their podcast is excellent. The coverage continues with reactions after each day of games and previews of the upcoming rounds. If you want the best March Madness analysis, subscribe to the Eye on College Basketball podcast anywhere you find this podcast. All right, so quarterbacks who got taken here. It's, by the way, Washington. You had Washington selecting Corey Davis. That's a great fit. I was on Washington radio earlier Tuesday and got asked about Corey Davis. And I was on 106.7 The Fan or whatever. And they're like, what would a Corey Davis contract look like? I was like, What? Hold on. Like, let me Google. I mean, yeah, it's like, I don't know. Is Allen Robinson a free agent? Like, is Kenny Golladay? How the hell do you want me to answer that?
So what did you tell him?
I said $9.5 million a year on a short term.
It's a pretty good guess, I think. I think that's probably the floor, I think.
I said it all depends on, because Golladay we knew wasn't going to be tagged, I think, when I was on. So I was like, if Galladay's out there, then I think somewhere in 9 to 10 million. But if Golladay gets tagged too, then maybe Corey Davis and JuJu are the top guys, and Corey Davis gets 10 or 11 or 12, something like that.
It's tough to project in the reduced cap, but I feel like 9 is probably about the floor. I mean, it seems like,
he's a free agent, young, productive.
Yeah.
In his 1 year anyway. After that, you have the Bears taking Jameis Winston, which is really what, no offense, Nick Foles, what they should have done last year.
Yeah, I think in this scenario, if you were playing it like a mock draft or a draft of free agents, I mean, the Bears, what do they need more than anything? It's a quarterback. Jameis Winston, I don't know that in real life or in this scenario, he's their plan A or B or C. But if you have the opportunity to sign him, I mean, who else? Like, if you're not getting in real life, if you're not getting Deshaun Watson, you missed on Matt.
Yeah,
you're not getting Russell Wilson. You missed on Matt Stafford. Sam Darnold is a name that I feel like maybe is a possibility with Chicago. Or you don't see it.
It could make sense. The problem is, like, is Chicago the type of team that can make the case that they deserve a chance to build up a former number 2 overall pick and develop?
To who though? Who are they making that case?
To ownership, I guess. Like, do you think if you trade for, no, it makes sense. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But like, I mean, is Sam Darnold definitely winning you more games than Nick Foles if for the Bears this year on like a weird off season? I mean,
I think they would sell it as, look, we all know Nick Foles is not our answer in 2022, 2023, but with us as a staff or whoever, like Sam Darnold, if we acquire him, there's a decent chance he could be our answer beyond this season. I mean, the untapped talent there is still there. So I think they could sell it.
Russell Wilson didn't do them any favors by naming Chicago as one of his landing spots. Like,
by putting the pressure on them to.
Yeah, now it's like whatever they do, if it's not Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson, they're in trouble with the fan base.
Yeah.
So that's a concern.
But yes, I think that the Jameis Winston thing, I think, speaks to the reality of their situation. If they don't get Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson, and that's going to take a whole heck of a lot to do that. I mean, the reality is they're going to probably be stuck with a free agent, whether that's Jameis Winston.
They might be rooting for Drew Brees to come back so they can go get Jameis Winston.
Yeah. I mean, Andy Dalton, they're very uninspiring names. And to be honest, is an Andy Dalton and Nick Foles competition in the summer? Like, who is confident they're keeping their jobs through that? I don't know.
Yeah, both those guys are playing like 7-8 games apiece. If it's Andy Dalton, Nick Foles would be my theory.
Yeah.
You also have the Saints taking Ryan Fitzpatrick. Is that there's nobody else left, and I've got to give what's the deal there?
I think the deal is the free agent quarterbacks. I mean, so the idea is the Saints are strapped for cap. If it's not Drew Brees and it's not Russell Wilson, which I guess I wouldn't put it past the Saints to do something wild like that, get that done, but they're going to be stuck with Jameis Winston, and in this scenario, he goes to the Bears. Let's just say in real life, Jameis Winston gets a little bit more to play elsewhere. I don't know that that's likely, but you could take a guy like Jacoby Brissett and continue to play dump down ball and try and win, just giving it to Alvin Kamara. But Ryan Fitzpatrick, I just think the idea is fun. I mean, he's got more of an arm than Drew Brees had for much of 2020. I think he'd look good in the gold. I think that if you plug him in, you have a chance of sneaking into the playoffs this year. So to me, it's more of a fun idea. Ryan Fitzpatrick playing for the Saints.
Wow. And a little bit of breaking news here as we talk about free agents in the draft. And I need to see, where did you have Levante David going? You mentioned to the Panthers.
Number 8.
He won't be doing that because he just signed back to the Buccaneers on a 2-year, $25 million contract, according to Ian Rappaport of NFL Media. I have been saying, and actually I had said on, I think I said on the radio, because the people in Washington were like, we want Levante David? How much? I was like, what? I don't I'm not Levante David, James. I said like 12 million a year. 12. I said 3 years, 36 million. He ended up getting more than that from the Buccaneers, who paid him handsomely, sort of paying him for being underpaid and underrated for a few years now. And he's a key part of Todd Bowles' defense. That is a really nice pull by them. Now they really just have, it's like, grab Shaq Barrett, restructure Tom Brady, maybe go free agent chasing. Maybe you bring back Ndamukong Suh. I mean, they're just straight up running it back next year, and it's kind of scary if you're the NFL.
Those initial numbers, I mean, 2 years, 25 million. I think that's like a home run for the Bucs. I mean, I know that he's older.
I think it's a win-win. I'll give it. I mean, yeah, it's not outrageously expensive, and I would, they have so much cap space right now that they may even, I don't know if they front loaded or how they're going to handle it, but I mean, that's not detrimental to their cap. It doesn't keep him in the plans for the long haul. It sort of signifies that they may do this extension with Tom Brady, but who knows how long it's going to go. And it'll give Levante one more bite of the apple in theory in free agency in 2 years.
I think it makes a ton of sense. And it's 2 years, 25 million. So you're talking 12.5 million there. That's under, I'm looking at the salaries for this year. That's less than Zach Cunningham, CJ Mosley, Deion Jones. I mean, you're paying a fair price, I think, for what you're going to get over the next 2 years. So I think
I'm telling you, Cody, this is how this is no surprise. It's how it worked in Denver with Peyton Manning. It's how it worked in New England with Tom Brady. These guys are going to be willing to take less. They're in a state with no income tax. They're on a team that they feel like can win big and win now and win again. And they love the 2020 season. And now they're going to run it back for 2021. And they want to be drunk on pontoon boats, tossing the Lombardi Trophy across large stretches of water.
And if you're the Bucs, you're not burying yourself by paying, you're giving him 2 years. You're not paying him a 4-year, $70 million extension here. So it's not horrible for the team either.
Yeah. One thing I was going to say, I think it's kind of interesting that, so you had because the Jets have a second first round pick in obviously because of the Seahawks, the Jamal Adams thing. But so they go Shaq Barrett up top and then come back and get Curtis Samuel. That's a really nice combo. Like that's not even an insanely impossible combo to happen in real life for the Jets.
Yeah, I think that's a guy you can, you give him a few carries, you give him a few screen passes, you move him around the offense. I think that whether it's Sam Darnold or whether it's a rookie quarterback, that's somebody, he's not going to be your dominating, opposing number one receiver, but maybe you can get that in the draft. Maybe you can, I don't know that you're double dipping with a guy like Kenny Golladay and Curtis Samuel, but he's maybe a fun chess piece as long as you have a plan for him. I think he's a guy that could also make $9+ million a year, but you got to be able to use him correctly and use him in different ways.
For sure. All right. I think that about covers it. Anything else we need to hit on in the free agency draft or in the franchise tag period? I'm sure that we'll have plenty more to discuss. Tons of breaking news coming out. We'll have emergency podcast. We're breaking down free agency as only we can on the Pick Six podcast here. Cody Benjamin, thanks for your time, buddy. Talk to you soon.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.